Good evening, everyone. Why don't we stand and go to the Lord in prayer? Let us worship Him. Lord, we just stand before you, Lord. We thank you, Lord God, for this holy week, Lord God, that we can just come into remembrance, Lord God, of what you've done, Lord. Just giving your all, Lord God. Giving your all, Lord God, so that we can be saved, Lord. We thank you, Lord God, that we can worship you freely. Thank you that you tore the veil, Lord God. You opened the door to heaven, Lord God, because you are the doorway to heaven, Lord God. You are the one, Lord God, that provides our means, Lord God, to be in fellowship with you, to be part of your family, Lord God, to be with you, Lord. And we thank you that it's not by merit, that we can never earn salvation. We can never earn your favor, Lord God. It's something that you give freely, Lord God, by your Son, Lord Jesus. We thank you, Lord Jesus, for all that you do, Lord God. And continue to remind us, Lord God, this week, Lord God, as we lift up our hearts unto you, Lord God, as we continue, Lord God, to seek you and pursue you, and just help us to pursue you harder, Lord God, pursue you deeper, Lord God. Your depth, Lord God, is unlimiting, Lord God. You're limitless, Lord. You're limitless. So, Lord God, we just ask, Lord, you continue to search our hearts. Help us, Lord God, to just strive to get closer to you, Lord. Especially in these times, Lord God. These times that this world is just getting darker, Lord. And just the things that are happening, Lord. We pray, Lord God, that you just continue to give us a heart for you, Lord God, just to cling to you, Lord God, to be faithful to you, Lord. And so we lift up this time unto you, Lord God. Continue to strengthen us by your word. Continue to feed us, Lord God. And help us, Lord God, to be faithful daily, Lord God, to seek your face, Lord God, and to read your word, Lord. And to continue, Lord God, to be alert and stay in prayer, Lord. Give us hearts of prayer, Lord. Hearts that pray, Lord God, and continually are in communion with you, Lord. And we pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. Who breaks the power of sin and darkness, whose love is mighty and so much stronger, the King of glory, the King above all kings, who shakes the whole earth with holy thunder, who leaves us breathless in awe and wonder, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. Praise the cross. You laid down your life that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Amen. Who brings our chaos? Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan a son and daughter? The King of glory, the King above all kings. Who rules the nations with truth and justice, shines like the sun in all of its brilliance, the King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You laid down your life that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb, and worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. And worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. And worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, worthy. Oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. One more time. This is amazing grace. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love, that you would take my place, that you would bear my cross. You would lay down your life, that I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. I'm forgiven because you were forsaken. I'm accepted, you were condemned. I'm alive and well, your spirit is within me, because you died and rose again. I'm forgiven because you were forsaken. I'm accepted, you were condemned. And I'm alive and well, your spirit is within me, because you died and rose again. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, would die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true, and it's my joy to honor you in all I do. I honor you. I'm forgiven, and I'm forgiven because you were forsaken, and I'm accepted. You were condemned, and I'm alive and well. Your spirit is within me because you died and rose again. And I'm forgiven because you were forsaken. Sing it out. I'm accepted. You were condemned. I'm alive and well. Your spirit is within me because you died and rose again. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, would die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true, and it's my joy to honor you. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, would die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true. All I you. You are my King. You are my King. You are my King. Jesus, you are my King. Amazing love. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, would die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true, and it's my joy to honor you. Amazing love, how can it be that you, my King, would die for me? Amazing love, I know it's true, and it's my joy to honor you in all I do. I honor you in all I do. I honor you in all I do. I honor you. Lord, we stand before you, Lord. worship you, Lord, continuously, Lord. We continue, Lord God, to come to you, Lord God, needy, Lord. And we thank you, Lord God, that you meet us here, Lord. And you draw to us, Lord God. And you give us the honor and privilege, Lord God, to draw to you, Lord. You've made us worthy, Lord. And we thank you for that, Lord. Continue, Lord God, to mold our hearts, Lord God. Continue the work that you've begun, Lord. We just continue, Lord God, to give you our all in all, Lord. Meet us here, Lord, we pray. In Jesus' name. And we all pray in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's greet one another.
Okay, good evening and welcome to Calvary Chapel, Three Crosses this evening. And what a blessed worship time we had this evening. Well, this evening Pastor Dwayne will be teaching from the book of Daniel in chapter 8. And so you can prepare your hearts for the message this evening. And on Sunday, Pastor Dwayne will bring a special message of hope for the Easter celebration here at church. You know, it'd be good to take a look at our cell phones, make sure they're in no ring mode, so we don't have any disruptions during the service. If you could do that, that would be a real blessing. Reminder that directly following the service, if you're able to stay, we do have corporate prayer. We just would be so blessed if everyone would stay behind and pray with us and bring up praises. Do that together, and we also do that on Tuesday mornings at 6:30 a.m. So if you're able to join us, that would be such a blessing if you could join us for corporate prayer on Tuesday at 6:30 a.m. Well, this Friday is Good Friday, and we're going to have a Good Friday service at 6:30 p.m. So we'll be gathering here to honor the sacrifice that Jesus made for all of us on that Friday when he went to the cross. So this journey that we've been seeing all through the year, as we look at the church calendar, it all leads down to Good Friday where he comes to the cross and he gets on that cross for us. So at 6:30 p.m. we'll be here. Pastor Dwayne will have a special message to honor Jesus' sacrifice. And Sunday we'll gather to celebrate the risen Christ. And so we'll be celebrating at both services. Pastor Dwayne will have a special message of hope on Sunday. So it's a time to really, we were talking last week how it's a time to evangelize. It's a
Well, good evening. Good evening, as Lester would say. I'm still practicing. He does it so, like it comes naturally to him, right? Continue to pray for him as he's out of town. Exciting week. I wish I'd put a Good Friday on this card. I forgot to do that. But as you're handing it out, let people know we have a Good Friday service. But there's quite a few of these left. And what we're going to do, and if you want to hand out some, we got to get rid of them because we don't want to throw them away. So one way I will do, and if you want to do, is go to Walmart and stick it on their windows. You know what's really cool about Walmart, I figured out, is by the time I got through, I could go back again. There's a bunch of new cars. So I encourage you, and be praying. Also, we don't want to just give them out. We want to invite people. We want them God to prepare their hearts. We want them to come here and hear God's message. We want them to have them accept and know the truth and have real hope. That's what it's all about. So be praying for that. I think that's all I have. Let's begin with a word of prayer. First, if you want to go ahead and turn your Bibles to Daniel chapter 8. We'll look at the entire book, chapter this afternoon. But let's begin with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, I pray as we come here, we've sang these songs of worship to you and praise. And I pray, Lord, through that it's prepared our hearts, our minds to hear your voice. Many times I say the message, Lord, but we know we're here to hear your voice as you speak to each and every one of us individually. And then as you speak to us, as you establish the church, you speak to us as a family, as a body. So I pray, Lord, just help us focus on your voice and your words. As we go out through life, we come in here with worries. On your words, as you'll give us wisdom and direction in all things, that we can leave here encouraged and blessed. And we ask all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Daniel chapter 8. You know, the whole book of Daniel is pretty amazing. I put a title on this, and as we go through it, you'll see, I realized, here's all I heard in here so much. The title is The Ram, the Goat, and a Bunch of Horns. That's what you see. You're talking about a ram, a goat, and then a bunch of horns. When you first read, and matter of fact, I'm going to do it differently than I've seen in a lot of commentaries. As you go through the first, I think it's first 14 verses, it's giving this a picture, talking about goats and rams, but it doesn't tell you. Again, what we're going to be seeing tonight is Daniel having another vision. And what I think a lot of people do, they get ahead of themselves because they've already read it and they know what it's talking about. But really, I'm going to read it like as if we're reading it for the first time. So when we see it, it's going, I have no idea what he's talking about. But what is really cool, at the halfway mark of this letter, God's going to explain to us what it means. So there's no guessing involved. It's going to show us. There's a lot of cool facts in here, but in the end, we want to know, what is the purpose of this? I did all this studying and writing all these notes down, and I was like, at the end, it's a lot of information. Then I was like, what's the purpose of Daniel chapter 8? So hopefully when we're done, you guys will be able to have this application. So let's begin with Daniel. You know what? Daniel chapter 8, verse 1. In the 3rd year of King Belshazzar, of his reign, I, Daniel, had a vision after the one that I had already appeared to me. Now, I want to just stop at the very first verse. You guys remember, we've already talked about Belshazzar. Well, he was the co-regent, the co-leader, co-king of Babylon. He kind of reigned with his father until his father, King Nebuchadnezzar, was exiled in 550 B.C. You remember, he's the one that saw the writing on the wall. It's so amazing, even in the pagan, or the regular, let's say, non-Christian society. I want to say pagan. That's really getting churchy, isn't it? Don't go out and call any non-Christian a pagan. Hey, I heard you're a pagan. Non-Christians even use the phrase, didn't you see the writing on the wall? And it all goes back to the Bible and Daniel. I believe it's Daniel chapter 6, where God wrote on the wall telling King Belshazzar, the end is here. And we know that very night that the Medo-Persians came and overtook Babylon. The Babylonian Empire was ended that night. Well, It's kind of interesting. As I was reading this, I was like, well, that already happened. How can you be getting another dream? Just if you haven't noticed already, Daniel is not in chronological order. So here what we're seeing is he's having another dream. And 7 years later, I believe when he has that next the handwriting on the wall. King Belshazzar's reign was very short, approximately 3 years. And when I look at him, we don't know a whole lot about him, but what we see, him sitting in and having this big banquet. You remember he had this big banquet while the Medo-Persians were attacking the wall. Now, it was a very fortified city. Babylon was fortified, so he had all this confidence. But I see arrogancy in him. I just see a spoiled rich kid. That's kind of what came into my mind, with all this power. And God addressed it immediately. So his reign as king was very short, 3 years. Now this vision comes, he says this vision he's getting today in chapter 8 comes after a previous vision. What vision did we just talk about last week? The vision of the 4 beasts. Very interesting. This vision happened after this. And he's going to, in the next few chapters, Daniel's going to have even more visions. And one thing I want to point out again, realize this is close to the end of Daniel's life. So what does that tell you? What do we need to be reminded of? God's not done with us until he's done with us. You may be thinking, I can retire now, I can't hardly move, but you're still here, right? That means God still is using you. You don't have to be young, you don't have to be middle-aged. God, if you're still here, he has a purpose for you. And many of us, hopefully we have gained some godly wisdom that we can share with others. So let's go ahead and look at Daniel chapter 8, verses 2 through 4. As he continues, Daniel says, in my vision, I saw myself in the citadel of Susa, in the province of Elam. In the vision, I was beside the Ulah Canal. I looked up, and there before me was a ram with 2 horns, standing beside the canal, and the horns were long. One of the horns was longer than the other, but grew up later. I watched the ram as it charged toward the west and the north and the south. No animals could stand against it, and no one could rescue it from its power. It did as it pleased and became great. In his dream, is there a map up there next? Did you see the map yet? Okay, it talks about Susa, which this is the city. It's actually a very important city. See, remember, right now we're in the Babylonian Empire. This dream is showing Daniel the future, the next empire, the Persian Empire. And Susa, right here, there's 2 different, in Hebrew it's Shushan. And in Aramaic, I think, it's Susa. But you see it's right here's Jerusalem and here's Shushan. So it's a very important city in the future Persia. So what's happening here, Daniel has this vision, this dream. He sees himself standing in this city of Susa. Actually, the Susa is the Greek name, and Shusha is the Hebrew name. This city, Shusha, is today, if you guys like any information about where it is today, it's actually in the modern-day Shush of Iran. So it kind of puts you a little bit in perspective. Now, why in this city? Why is his vision beginning in this city that yet does not exist? Well, because the next empire will be Persia, the Persian Empire, and that will be a major city in Persia. Now, as we see Daniel, what I like about Daniel, he keeps saying, I was watching. So he continues to look. He kind of reminds me of, you ever looked at something just trying to figure out what is the meaning of that? Just think about it. He's seen a ram. He sees himself in a city, and then he sees this ram with 1 long horn and 1 short horn. And I just picture Daniel standing there just thinking, God, what does that mean? You ever ask God, what are you trying to tell me? What does that mean? So he's standing there, he's looking, and as he watches, he sees the ram begin to charge. What does it mean when a ram charges? It means it's attacking something. It says it's going in 3 different directions. North, I think he went north, west, and south. Didn't go east because that's the direction he's coming from. So he sees this, Daniel sees this ram charging, and he tells us what he sees. Now just picture, all you can tell you is pictures this ram. He just sees this ram charging and destroying. Let's look at it from the animal's perspective. No animal was able to stand in its path. Whichever direction it wanted to go, it would go. If anything got in its way, it would trample over it. So basically, wherever this ram decided to go, it would go. You're really trying to think, what is God trying to, what does this got to do with anything? Well, we'll see. Let's go ahead and look at the next few verses 5 through 7. See here, I love Daniel. Daniel's like me. He says, as I was thinking about it, suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between its eyes came from the west. First, he's looking and trying to figure out, and here comes this goat. This is really helping his picture right now. Now we have a goat. It came from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. Now I want you to keep that in mind, without touching the ground. It came toward the two-horned ram I had seen standing beside the canal and charged it in a great rage. I saw it attack the ram furiously, striking the ram and shattering its two horns. The ram was powerless to stand against it. The goat knocked it to the ground and trampled on it, and none could rescue the ram from its power. As we see Daniel, he's there contemplating. I like that big word. He's contemplating. He's really thinking hard on everything that he's seen up to this point. He's just basically trying to make sense of it. What is this all about? So then here comes this goat to clear up the picture. We have a ram. Now a goat comes with one horn. Remember, the ram had two, one long and one short. Now we have a goat with one protruding. I love the way it put it. It had one single horn coming out between his eyes. I just thought that was kind of humorous because, how well can you see if something's right? Anyway, he was just charging forward, moving very fast. Remember it said the goat, his feet barely touched the ground or didn't touch the ground? Basically, he's saying he was moving very quickly. It looked and appeared as if he was not touching the ground, but basically he was moving quickly. The goat attacks the ram. And what's very important to note at this time is the ram, up to this point, has never been defeated, has been unstoppable. Remember I told you, wherever the ram wanted to go, it would go. But now we have the goat. Sounds like a farm class, doesn't it? Farm and ranch class. The goat hits the ram and totally annihilates him, wipes him out. Let's go on to the verse 8 through 14. Just hang on. There is some biblical meaning to this. The goat became very great, but at the height of its power, the large horn was broken off, and in its place 4 prominent horns grew up towards the 4 winds of heaven. And out of one of them came another horn, which started small but grew in power to the south and to the east and to the beautiful land. It grew until it reached the host of heavens, and it threw some of the starry host down to the earth and trampled on them. It set itself up to be as great as the commander of the army of the Lord. It took away the daily sacrifice from the Lord, and his sanctuary was thrown down. Now you get a picture of an animal, but you kind of get a little different picture here in these next few verses. Because of rebellion, the Lord's people and the daily sacrifice were given over to it. It prospered in everything it did, and truth was thrown to the ground. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to him, "How long will it take for this vision to be fulfilled?" The vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the rebellion, the cause that caused desolation, the surrender of the sanctuary, and the trampling underfoot of the Lord's people. He said to me, "It will take 2,300 evenings and mornings. Then the sanctuary will be reconsecrated." So this in the picture here got a little more fuzzy. It's talking about a goat, and then all of a sudden it's talking about it almost sounded like it went to the heavenly realm from the earthly realm, talking about the holy ones being cast down. What we see now, the goat has defeated the ram, and because it's defeated the ram, it now has become very powerful and very great. The pinnacle of its power, Daniel sees. Now, just remember, just picture yourself just looking at your dream, trying to figure out what in the world it means. He's watching this goat become very powerful, and all of a sudden it says Daniel sees that horn, that single horn, being broken off. Doesn't tell us how, but he just says he sees it being broken off. Once that horn is removed, he says 4 horns then emerge from where the one was. Where that single one was ripped off, 4 pop out from its head. Like that. I forgot you have the pictures. You have a visual. Now, one of the 4 horns was actually smaller. And I kind of like this part because it says the smaller one, it was smaller than all the other 3, but eventually became the strongest and most powerful. For you little guys, see? You can just hold on. But so you see the 4 horns, and the 4th one, the smallest one, becomes the strongest and the most powerful. Now, when you look at all this, what does it all mean? First, there's a ram attacking everything in sight. Then there's a goat appears that attacks and defeats the ram. And then there's horns everywhere. This is what I got. It's like goats, horns, rams. There's small horns. There's big horns. There's 4 horns. Sounds again like a class in Farm and Ranch, like we're going to college for Farm and Ranch. But what does it all really mean? As we look at Daniel, it even says Daniel is having a difficult time comprehending his vision. Because every time you see Daniel, it speaks to Daniel, he's standing there trying to figure out, he's looking intensely trying to figure out, what does this all mean? So up to this point, we have no clue. From what I just read to you, do you guys know what you're talking about? About a goat and a ram. They're all up mad. But thankfully, I was so happy that we're now to verse 15. Verses 15 through pretty much 27 is interpretation. This is what I love about some of the Old Testament. You don't have to guess because God says, Daniel wanted to know, or Joseph wanted to know, and God told him what the vision is about. So let's look at verse 15 through 22. Again, like I said, a lot of people would tell you what verses 15 through 22 meant as they were doing 1 through 14. I think that's kind of steals from what God is doing here. He reveals it. Here's how God reveals it to us. In verse 15, he says, while I, Daniel, was watching, what's he doing? He's watching again. Watching the vision and trying to understand it. There before me stood one who looked like a man. And I heard a man's voice from the Ulah calling, Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision. And we've all heard of Gabriel, the archangel Gabriel. As he came near the place where I was standing, I was terrified and fell prostrate. Son of man, he said to me, understand that these visions concern the time of the end. While he was speaking to me, now listen to this part because I want to address this when I get done. While he was speaking, I was in a deep sleep. He's standing there, he sees him coming, and when he approaches him, he says, I was in a deep sleep. I want to tell you what it means here in a minute. With my face to the ground. Then he touched me and raised me to my feet. He said, I'm going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath, because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. The 2-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. Now here, going into what it really stands for. So let me read verse 20 again. The 2-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. The shaggy goat is the king of Greece, and the large horn between its eyes is the first king. The 4 horns that replaced the one was broken off represent 4 kingdoms that will emerge from this nation but will not have the same power. Gabriel was sent to Daniel. Even though God has revealed dreams to Daniel before, at this point, he hasn't been revealed to him yet. So God sends Gabriel to give him the interpretation of this vision. So Gabriel appears before Daniel. We are told that, this is funny because he says, he appears before Daniel and he falls into a deep sleep. I like the way the NLT version puts it. It says that Daniel passed out and fell to the ground upon seeing this angelical messenger. He just sees this Gabriel, overwhelms him, basically freaks him out, scares him, he passes out. That's another way to look at it. Some see where he falls down prostrate. But it says, as he approaches him, he fell asleep. I don't think that's going to make any of us fall asleep. If you see an angel, it's going to really probably freak you out at first. Now, after the angel revives Daniel, tells him, lifts him up, he then gives him the interpretation. He begins by saying, the ram I told you about in the beginning, represents the Medo-Persian Empire. Now, again, it was the Medo-Persians that came together and attack the city of Babylon when Belshazzar was a king having his banquet. So they come against him, and they defeat him. Now, 9 years after Daniel has this vision here, the Mede and Persians form an alliance. So that alliance doesn't happen until 9 years. The vision we're talking about right now, 9 years later is when the Medo-Persians come and attack Babylon. So what we're seeing is God is revealing to Daniel and us the future. Even more we're already past when it's already happened, but people look back, historians look back to the things that Daniel said, and they say, and matter of fact, we'll talk about a particular person in the Greek history, that it was so detailed that they said Daniel had to write this letter after this happened. It was so accurate, it had to happen later. But historically we know, biblically we know that's not true. This was written before all these things happened. Now how is that even possible? Because God is outside of time. This shows you and I, we'll see that rolls out through this thing, is that God is in control. Nothing surprises God. He already knows what's going to happen before it happens. So, 9 years later, the Medo-Persians form an alliance, come against the Babylonian kingdom, and defeat it and are victorious. Now we see, it says the second horn, it's talking about these two horns, is Medo-Persian. It said one horn was shorter than the other. Now here's why, and this is amazing what it means. One horn grew stronger than the first because the Medes, when the Medes and Persians first had this alliance, the Medes were more powerful. But over time, the Persians became even more powerful than the Medes. They were like the leading, in this alliance, they became the ones that were leading. So we see the bigger horn indicating the Persians and the shorter one, the Medes. Now then Gabriel goes on to explain the goat. What does the goat mean? We see the ram, nothing can stop. The Medo-Persian, this empire, when it began, Babylonians couldn't stop them. They continued to go across the region, and no one could stop them. And now we see, comes on the scene, the goat. The goat is the Grecian Empire with a single horn. And he said the single horn, it tells us that single horn represents the first king of the Grecian Empire. You guys know who that first king is? The most well-known king of Greece? Alexander the Great. That single horn represents that very first king. And it says, and I was reading the number, I think they said the army that Alexander the Great had was only 36,000. And I was reading in the commentaries, he said, how can a 36,000-man army beat a 1 million-man army? He said the guerrilla warfare. He says he was small, and it was for a purpose. You know why it said the goat's feet barely touched the ground? Alexander the Great moved quickly, conquered quickly, and kept moving. He began to rule as king, I believe, at 16. By 33, he had conquered anything civilized known nations up to that point. So it moved very quickly. It was small, but that made it possible to move quickly across the land. And it says, remember the goat? It says, at the height of its power, the horn was broken off. Now we know the horn represents Alexander the Great. What would it mean to be broken off? He dies. Historically, they say, after all this conquering that he did, he came back and he had a party. It all seems to have problems with parties, right? God's not a party pooper, but the reason why they do these parties, like Belshazzar had the banquet, now Alexander the Great has this party. He threw this party for all his soldiers on returning from Babylon, and he became drunk. He walked back to his residence in the rain. He went back to his house, and it was raining. He fell asleep in his wet clothes, and within 3 days he died of pneumonia at the age of 33. He dies, and he doesn't leave a successor. But one thing I want to point out, Alexander, his father was a general for the Assyrians. And his father recognized that his son, Alexander, had a great gift. So he began to send him to be instructed by all these great generals. This is how he was able to defeat. He had this great knowledge. He was gifted, and he had this great knowledge. So the world would look upon Alexander the Great and say, that is the example that you should emanate. You should follow that example as a world leader. This is what a leader should look like. But we see from a biblical standpoint, that is not an example you want to follow. In the end, he just simply got drunk and got sick and died. Now, what happens to a kingdom when a king dies? There's usually a successor, right? What happens if the king has not set up a successor? The fights begin, right? Everyone begins to claim that this is for me. Well, he had 4 generals underneath him. So what happened is the kingdom was divided up into 4 regions ruled by these 4 generals. And I'm going to give them to you. I'm not sure if I put them on your list. I don't think I did. I can give them to you later if you want them. These 4 generals, one of the names were Cassander. He ruled over Greece and its region. Lysimachus ruled over Asia Minor. And this is one you might have heard of as Seleucus. He ruled over Syria and Israel's land. And then Ptolemy ruled over Egypt. So now we see, think about this, all that he strived for to develop and to create this huge empire, as soon as he dies, it's divided up. So can you guys draw an application out of that? What would you think? What would speak to you? Does anyone have an idea what you'd get out of that? Focusing on everything, the riches and the things of the world. What do you say, Tony?
Well, what I see is kingdoms were rising, but they didn't fear God, it sounds like.
How about a personal application? Look at Alexander the Great. We're talking about him specifically. He's investing his entire life in building this empire. What's going to happen to every single earthly empire? All the riches. It's going to all disappear. It's all going to be gone. So basically what the application I guess that's kind of cheating. I already had the answer in my head. The application is you can invest everything you have in things of the earth. Physical, fleshly things, because they're all going to be gone. So what should we invest our life into? Things of God, the spiritual things that last for eternity. From the world, they look at Alexander the Great and say, man, you guys need to follow his example. Yeah, that sounds like a great example. Conquer the world and then die. His whole life was battling, and it is all summed up into one great, I hope that was a good party. All this battling to die and drunk because again, he got drunk. Yes. I believe that's what I said. There's so many darn horns in here, right? Yes. Matter of fact, I'm going to get into that here in a second, I think. Yes, I am. Let's go ahead and look at verse 23. So the 4 horns, remember he was a single horn. Alexander the Great was a single horn. It broke off. And then from that one single horn came 4 horns with his 4 generals. I was wrapped up in my analogy, man. He drew me back in here. Verse 23. In the latter part of their reign, speaking of the generals, when rebels have become completely wicked, a fierce-looking king, a master of intrigue will arise. He will become a very strong, but not by his own power. He will cause astounding devastation and will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy those who are mighty, the holy people. He will cause deceit to prosper. He will consider himself superior. When they feel secure, he will destroy many and take his stand against the prince of princes. Yet he will be destroyed, but not by human power. The visions of evenings and mornings that has been given you is true, but seal up this vision, for it concerns the distant future. I, Daniel, was worn out. I lay exhausted for several days. Then I got up and went about the king's business. I was appalled by the vision. It was beyond understanding. I kind of know what he feels. I feel exhausted after studying this. There's so much in here. But these verses I just read, verse 23 to 27, they basically give us the interpretation of verses 9 through 14. You can almost lay them side by side when you read verses 9 through 14, and you can look at these verses, and it will explain to you what it means. Gabriel tells us that one of the 4 generals, from one of these 4 generals, okay, remember, we've got these 4 generals from the Grecian Empire. From one of them, one of those 4 generals will come what he's calling a small horn. And what that horn is, from that, I believe it's from the Cilicia region, will come a fierce king who will become very powerful. So picture this, you got four generals from the Cilicia region. From that general will come in the future a king that will be super fierce.
I heard someplace that the little horn that they're talking about, I heard it possibly could be Antichrist.
Could be, but it's not. And I'll go into that in a second because I thought it was too, and I'm going to point it out. It's actually a picture of him. Because I believe it's back in chapter 2. Remember it mentioned a little horn? Remember, and here's what made it so clear to me. I might as well tell you now. He's already probably finished my notes. We're talking about a little horn from the Grecian Empire. That little horn in chapter 2 comes from the Roman Empire. The last empire is the Roman Empire, and the very final empire that comes back in the end times is the 10 regions, 10 kings, and that is the reordering of the Roman Empire. From that Roman Empire comes the small horn. So it can't be the same. It's not the same one. But it is a picture of the Antichrist. Because when I tell you the dude's name, you're going to think he's the Antichrist, but he's not. Okay. No. All these things from Daniel's time is speaking of the future, but in our time, all these things have already happened. And I'm going to show that to you in a slide, in a picture. I don't know about you, but I love pictures. It really clarifies it, and I'll show you in a minute. So we have this king that comes up. He's going to become very strong, very powerful, very fierce, very wicked. And he begins to destroy people and property for the purpose of expanding his kingdom. Have you noticed in history, no matter how big their territory is, they're never satisfied? So the next guy wants to gain more. He does the same thing. But this king would specifically attack God's people. First, he's going out, wiping people out because he just wants to take their land. He wants to get this territory. But then he gains a hatred for God's people, the Jews. Have we not seen that before? And we talk about Hitler. He had this special hatred for God's people. We say the Jews, but let's tell it what it really is. He had this hatred for God's people. And this guy here, he began to attack Israel. Again, I put he is not the same little horn as in, it's actually chapter 7 that talks about that. I thought it was 2. That little horn you were talking about.
So then it is talking about Adolf Hitler?
No. He's a picture of like Adolf Hitler's is kind of the same. I'm going to give you this guy's name because I have to read his name because I can't really see it. But the same attitude as Hitler, wanting to take over the world, wanting to kill the Jews. So, he is not the Antichrist, but he is a foreshadowing of or illustration of the Antichrist. Now think about this. You think of Hitler, I just need to give you this dude's name. Let me just tell you who he is. Antiochus Epiphanes. Have you guys heard of him? No? Yes? You know, it sounds like it, but he actually is Greek. He's a Greek. We've all heard about him, and you can actually, if you go back and read the history on this guy, horrific, just trying to kill him. So he's a picture of the Antichrist. And what I wanted to point out, if you look at him and Hitler, if they're only a picture, can you imagine how vicious the real Antichrist is going to be? This is only a glimpse. He likes to put a shadow. If you look back at the Holocaust, that was a horrific event. You know, it's even more horrific. Nations trying to say it never happened. I was able to go to Israel, and Fred got to go too, and we got to see, they have this, I don't know if you call it a museum, but a remembrance place. You go and you can see the history of the Holocaust. They have actual materials, clothing from the prisoners, from the Jews that were put in these concentration camps. Now, if you guys all seen the pictures and the movies and stuff that talk about this, how horrific it is, the real Antichrist, this is only a glimpse of how wicked he's going to be. We're talking about the end times, the 7 years of tribulation. Who wants to be here when that happens? Not me. Now, we can go into pre-trib, post-trib, and all this. Is the church going to be removed before? I think they are. That's when I'm going. Fred's going to go at the end, right? Post. I said, I'm taking the first trip out of here. But anyway, they talk about, I believe, as I would always go back and forth, I kind of finally saw what God always seems to deliver his people before he brings judgment on those that reject him. So,
I was thinking if Jesus doesn't take us the first time, then we can take a spaceship out here.
we do not want to be here. The first 3.5 years of this Antichrist reign, he's going to look like the best, greatest leader. He's going to bring the world together. He's going to bring peace in this world that we've never seen. But it's all a lie, because after the first 3.5 years, then you're going to see what you're going to see is the Antichrist. So, not me, but yes. A lot of people will see him because he's going to do miraculous things, and people are going to look at him. You know, Satan has done a lot of miraculous things. He imitates what Christ has done. That's one point I want to point out to you. You know that Satan can't create anything. He takes what God has created, marriage, sex within the marriage. He's taken all that and made it wicked. What God has made to bless us, Satan takes that and twists it. Even when he was talking to Jesus in the desert, he took the scriptures, and just took it and twisted it. He didn't make anything new. He just twisted it and made it evil. So, the part we're talking about, this little horn that comes up from one of the generals, comes actually from the general that's over the Seleucid dynasty. You can look that up, or I can spell it for you. So he comes out of there. I'm going to give you some commentary. I love John Corson. If you like history, a background, build up to some of the Bible, John Corson, and for every book, he has a pretty good introduction, and even in the notes. So, I'm talking about this little horn. He says, from 175 to 164 BC, this little horn, known as Antiochus, came on the scene as the leader of Syria and Babylon. He called himself, now listen to this guy, he called himself Theos. Have you heard the word Theos? It speaks of God. Theos Epiphanes, which means God manifested. He was calling and acknowledged himself as being God. Others called him Antiochus Epiphanes, or Antiochus the Shining One, because he was ruling in the area of Antioch. The other one, the Jews knew him as a madman, so they called him Antiochus Epiphanes. I don't know how you say it. It looks almost the same, but it actually means Antiochus the Insane One. The Jews knew him as the Insane One, and what's interesting, history proves that to be a fact. He was insane. The dude was crazy. Probably, if you read scriptures, he says he became, what we just read, he said he came into power not on his own. What does that mean? Satan working through him, empowering him to obtain this power and this position, to be so wicked. And so he's basically allowed Satan to overtake him. So he begins to expand his empire. Everything that he set his eyes on, including Israel, anything he saw, he wanted, he took it. So he began to expand. And as he took over Israel, he began to, like I was telling you, to have this hatred. Not just a dislike, but it says a hatred towards the Jews. And he did some amazing things, horrific things to them. He began to demand all their holy writings. Anything that they had of scriptures, he said he wanted them to give it to him. He would take it. And he would burn them. It's not that he wanted to read them and know them for himself. He wanted to destroy them. Now, really, who does that sound like? That sounds like Satan working through this king. I want everything about God, I want to destroy it. I want anything that's written in your nation about God removed. Kind of sounds like our nation now, doesn't it? Claiming to be God, listen to this part. He built a statue of himself and put it in God's temple. The temple of God. He built his own statue and put it in there. The Jews revolted. You know that's their holy of holies. You know, God's holy of holies. So the Jews reacted and they rebelled. Guess what happened? He killed 40,000 in one day. 40,000 Jews were killed in one day because of this revolt. And then he says, historically, he says, perhaps 1 million more were killed in the next few months. That's a lot of people. I don't know, do you guys remember how many were killed in the Holocaust? There's a 6 million. 40,000 in one day and 1 million within a few months. That's a lot. And then here, he's not done yet. He then, pigs are not kosher for Jews, right? So he in other words, they're not. It makes them unclean. He then took a pig and butchered it on the altar of the temple. Basically, he's really not doing this. He's doing this to God. He's saying, you're not going to do anything about it. He butchers this pig on the altar, smeared the blood on the walls, and forced the priest to drink the remainder. He was a cruel madman, a picture of the Antichrist himself. That's really scary to think about. If it's just a picture of what the Antichrist is really going to be like. And the reason why I bring that up is some people say, I'll wait till later. When I see these things happening, if it's during the tribulation, I'll keep this down and I will accept him then. If you can't accept God today, how are you going to be able to do it then? When there's real pressure. Like in other countries, they demand that you reject Jesus Christ or you die, and they put you to death or cut your head off. Now in verse 14, it's interesting. It says, you remember it says, we are told that, here's what it said in verse 14. It will take 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be reconsecrated. So we see the temple was made filthy. It was made unclean. Everything that he did, killed the pig and put blood everywhere. And he says within 2,300 evenings and morning, it will be reconsecrated, restored to the way it should be. So what does this mean? A little more history. What are these 2,300 days? This is interesting. This is historic, but it's important. These 2,300 days, when Antiochus Epiphanes began his reign, was in September the 6th, 171 BC. A man named Matthias at the village of Modin. Basically what happened, they revolted, and it called the Maccabean Revolt. Have you guys heard the Maccabean Revolt? They killed this one man. He refused. We finally get a man that stands up to this crazy king that's wicked and says, I'm not going to allow you to do that. You know what happened to him? He killed him. But this man had 5 sons. It made him so angry, they rebelled against this crazy king. And from this rebellion, people came together to what is known the Maccabean Revolt. And through this Maccabean Revolt, he was driven out of Israel. And finally, when that point, when the temple was, after he was driven out, the temple was clean, made clean again. That exact day from when he became king to that day when he was driven out is exactly 2,300 days. This is what Daniel said. This is way before it happened. He said this is exactly how many days. He's going to come in, he's going to do this, and 2,300 days he's going to be gone. No one ever would have thought that would happen. As you see this madman killing everyone and desecrating God's temple. Remember, back in the Old Testament, this is the Holy of Holies where God would dwell. He goes in there, puts a statue of himself, slaughters a pig on God's altar. Basically, he's mocking God, isn't he? And to the exact day, kind of like when God said that the Messiah would come, he gave the exact time he would come, and he did. So in conclusion, when I got done with all this, I'm like, all this stuff is cool, but I came to a point, it's like, that's all this interesting history, but what's the point of it? Well, what I came up with, the lessons that I've learned, the number one lesson that I learned, I mentioned already, is God is in control. And built upon that first point is, we know God is in control because he has foretold the future. And not only did he foretell it, it unfolded exactly the way he said it would, didn't it? If you go back and you look at I encourage you, go read Daniel again, and I can give you some more information with it. Historically, you go back and see. They say, again, Daniel, they tried to say the book of Daniel was a fraud because it's too accurate. Isn't that a way to rule things? To look at it and say, well, that can't be that old because it's too accurate. In other words, what it said had so much detail. Historically, it matched up perfectly, even though hundreds of years before it actually happened. But again, we know why, right? God knows. God sees everything. And I have this picture. I'm going to show it to you again, okay? Because it's my own illustration that I love. I picture God. I'm God, just for a moment. And he's looking down, and here's time. Here's the beginning, here's the end. And everything in between. He sees everything. He's not in the time. So he knows what you're going to say. He knows what you're going to do before it even happens. You know when you fall into sin, you stumble and fall, and you like, God doesn't love me anymore because of what I did. So what you're saying is God didn't know. Oh, I didn't see that coming. God knows everything that we're going to do. All we ask for us, first of all, as non-believers, to repent, receive Jesus as our Lord and Savior. And as we become Christians, when we stumble and fall, he simply asks us to repent. Because he knows our sin will drive us away from him. Not necessarily that he pushes us away, but sin, because of sin in our life. When you guys are in sin, do you want to go before God? Because you know his light's going to shine upon that sin. You're going to have to repent. When you sin, here's a point I like to put out. When you sin, and if you guys need help with this, let me know. Do I need to tell you? Does anyone need to tell you when you've sinned? I'm not really sure. You know what happens when you start doing that? I'm not really sure if I sinned. You're just trying to convince yourself that you didn't sin. Because when I sin, I know I sin. And the reason I bring up this point is because when you sin, he says, immediately repent, and he will forgive you. Because you know how it hurts? It hurts you. Because you carry that, the Holy Spirit lives within you. You grieve the Holy Spirit, which grieves you. And the last thing that I learned was, Daniel 8 also showed us that evil and wickedness will not last forever. Every one of these kingdoms, wicked, they ended. So that's encouragement. We see wickedness in this world today seem to be getting more and more wicked. It's going to come to an end. So that's encouraging. But one more point I want to point out is, as it gets darker as Christians, even if your light's barely glowing, it's going to seem even brighter in the darkness. We are going to be the ones that deliver the truth to this dark and dying world. So we need to be prepared for that. So I want to end there. And then we're going to go into prayer. One second. And what I'm going to do before we go into prayer, I'll open a little discussion. So you can kill it out there, Marco. And Dave, you had a question?